My name is Alan. I'm just an ordinary ice cream man with an ordinary life. I know there are more interesting professions like policemen or firemen, but even with a life as ordinary and boring as mine, I have a story to tell you. A story that you might think could happen to 1 in a million people. Until you turn on the TV and you see that reality is different. But I'll tell you about that later. First of all, I have to tell you about my personal experience. It all happened when I was young. I was only 13 years old. I was too old to be so curious. I still had the excessive idealism of a little boy, but I was too old to get into trouble. That day, my parents went to the supermarket. I didn't feel like going, and I was old enough to take care of myself, so they had no problem leaving me alone, even if I was a bit of a troublemaker. I wasn't planning on leaving my room, honestly. I was playing video games in my room and having fun until I heard it. Like every day, the neighbor's dog started barking. To be honest, I never saw the neighbor's dog, but listening to it was horrible. Every day I heard their barks of pain, of fear. They were not coming from the yard or from inside the neighbor's house, but from his basement. Sometimes I would hide in the neighbor's yard and spy on them through the window. They looked like two normal people, but I didn't like the way they treated their dogs. From the window, I could see how the door to their basement was always closed, and from there, the dog would cry, bark, and scratch at the door. The elderly couple who lived there always treated me well, but I hated the way they treated their poor dog. My dog had died a few weeks before, and I was going through a phase where I wanted to rescue and bring in as many dogs as possible, but my parents wouldn't let me. Not only were my parents gone that day, but the neighbors weren't there either. This was a double opportunity. Not only would I get to play with the dog, but I would let them out of the basement for even a little while. I slipped into my neighbor's house through the window from their yard and walked slowly into the basement. I didn't want to scare the dog, so I knew I had to proceed carefully. I approached the door and tried to open it as slowly and quietly as possible, but it was locked. Hell, I knew this couldn't be easy. I started looking for the key everywhere, and at the same time, I took the opportunity to see the house for the first time. It was a normal house. Nothing in it was striking. The two old men who took care of it seemed to have a happy life, going on all kinds of vacations together. All the pictures were from when they were young. To my surprise, in all of them, there was a child. Something must have happened to him. All this was quite surprising to me, as they seemed like good people in general. I was surprised that people like this could treat an animal so badly. While I was looking at the pictures, I noticed that behind one of them, there was a small key hidden. This was the key to the basement. With a big smile, I almost ran to the place, and as I put the key in, it fit perfectly. With anticipation, I opened the door and took the first steps into the basement. Finally, I was inside. The basement looked very dark, and the stairs down were very dangerous. I didn't hear the dog, but I did hear a four-legged animal walking curiously, not knowing who was entering the basement. I took my first steps on the stairs. I couldn't see the bottom of the basement. It was too dark, and the light switch was at the bottom of the stairs. I continued advancing carefully so as not to break those old wooden stairs. I was considering that maybe this was not the best idea, but I was already too involved to stop moving forward. I had to at least see the dog. It was a bad idea to be afraid of him at that height. As my father used to tell me, the one who is more afraid than me is the dog. Once I got down, I happily turned on the lights without knowing what I was about to find. That one there, that wasn't a dog. It was a human. That poor man was chained up. He had a collar and was standing on all fours, looking at me curiously. Hey, are you all right? Did the old people do this to you? Suddenly, the man jumped on top of me to attack me. This person was totally crazy. I really thought he was a dog. All this time, those screams and cries were not those of a dog, but those of a human. I fought for my life and protected myself as much as I could from this terrifying person. Until luckily, there was a noise at the door, and the chained person was distracted for a few seconds, giving me the opportunity to escape and hide under the stairs. While I was waiting and hiding, The old man, the owner of the house, arrived furious with some chains and began to attack his prisoner violently.
I told you not to bark. Do you want to put on a show? Haven't I taught you enough?
In response, the prisoner began to cry, like a dog trying to attack a person, but he couldn't because the chain wouldn't stretch far enough to reach him. Suddenly, the man stopped attacking the dog and became thoughtful.
Hey, wait a minute. Why are the lights on? I could have sworn I turned them off before I left.
Taking advantage of this opportunity, I rammed the man with all the force I had. The damage was minimal, but with those 3 steps, I pushed him back, and I had achieved my goal.
You came in here. Now you can't.
That was the family that owned the house before they were killed by those 2 psychopaths. The only thing they kept was the kid in the picture, and they spent years and years training him to behave like, you can imagine, a dog. The boy, who was already over 20 years old, received all the psychological help he could, but the psychological damage was so great, but he took his own life before he could improve. As I said at the beginning, be very careful. Something as hard to believe as this can happen every day. When you are leaving your house, stare into their eyes and ask yourself, how well do I know this person? You never know if that elderly couple you have around you might be the most wicked and cruel people you will ever meet in your life.
I'm going to tell you the scariest thing that ever happened to me. And it happened when I was only 7 years old. I remember waking up one night to the sound of scratching coming from inside my bedroom. Rubbing my eyes, I sat up and listened again, placing a hand in my ear so I could get a fix on its locations. To my surprise, the sound seemed to be coming from inside the walls, and it was moving. This startled me at first, as I thought a person might be living inside the wall, possibly with bad intentions. But after thinking it over, it was probably just some raccoons or something. I climbed out of bed and followed the noise out of my room. Then made my way down the hall. I had to tiptoe the entire way so as not to wake my dad. If a raccoon really was crawling around inside the walls, then I could just scare it away by myself. At least, that's what I thought. The sound led me all the way down to my basement, a place I usually avoided. Whenever I went down there, I always felt uneasy, like I was being watched. I honestly wanted to go back to bed and forget the whole thing, but that scratching wasn't going away anytime soon. So I put on a brave face and opened the door. A chill ran down my spine as I peered down the stairway leading into the shadowy abyss. The scratching stopped for a second before picking back up, almost as if whatever was causing it was now aware of my presence. For a moment, I thought I was making a big mistake going down there by myself. What if the animal was dangerous? What if it was bigger than me? I quickly ignored these questions and scoffed at my own cowardice. I'm not scared of some dumb animal, I thought to myself, trying to be brave. All I have to do is be really sneaky and catch the animal by surprise. Feeling confident about my newfound plan, I immediately put it into action. I sat down and hastily took off my socks before tossing them aside. Then I slowly descended the stairs in my bare feet. Surely that would be enough to limit the noise of my footsteps. But, as an extra precaution, I kept a hand over my mouth to muffle my breathing. This all proved to be rather pointless in the end, however. The wood creaked loudly under my feet with every step I took, making stealth pretty much impossible. So much for that idea, I thought, while scampering the rest of the way down. If the creature was only vaguely aware of my presence before, then it undoubtedly knew my exact location now. The sound seemed to grow more frantic the closer I got to its source. I quickly followed it to a crawl space I didn't know I had. It was a small, square-shaped opening in the side of a wall, just big enough for a child to squeeze through, and it had a little door that was slightly ajar. Since I'd already come this far, I laid down flat on my belly and crawled inside using my elbows, much like a soldier crawling under barbed wire in an obstacle course. There was so little room that I pretty much had to be as flat as possible to fit. It was dark and cramped, but I kept crawling until the sound suddenly disappeared. I paused for a moment, waiting for it to pick back up again, but it never did. A little anticlimactic, but at least it finally stopped. Before I could even think of getting out, however, I heard a loud squeak behind me and quickly looked over my shoulder as best I could. To my absolute horror, a pack of rats were right behind me, blocking the way I came. I screamed and started crawling further into the tunnel as the rats gave chase, hungrily snapping their teeth at my toes behind me. I didn't get very far though, as I soon reached a dead end. I rolled onto my back and watched helplessly as the rats approached me. I quickly raised both of my bare feet off the floor and bent my knees back, preparing to kick them if they got too close. Stay back or else!" I stuttered. But the rats weren't scared of me in the slightest, and why would they be? Nosy little girls in pajamas probably didn't come down here all too often, so I must have looked like a juicy, all-you-can-eat buffet. Tears ran down my cheeks as I laid there, trembling, bare feet still raised in the air, waiting for them to attack. I felt like I was waiting for hours, but really, it was only for a minute or two. As if to taunt me, the rats kept snapping their teeth the closer they got to my feet. One of them tried to bite me, so I kicked it before hastily reacting with my foot. That must have angered them, because without warning, they all lunged at me, ready to feast. And that's when I screamed at the top of my lungs and kicked as hard as I could. But this proved to be a terrible idea on my part. Sending the soles of my feet flying into a swarm of hungry rats not only angered them further, but also gave them two easy targets to sink their teeth into. In an instant, I was swarmed by claws, teeth, and fur. They bit into every inch of my exposed skin they could find. Arms, legs, feet, everywhere. I tried to defend myself, but it was like fighting an ocean. I was only saved when my dad came running into the basement with a baseball bat because he heard me scream. He shouted with fatherly concern, "In here!" I cried out while fighting off the rodents as best I could. The rats must have been startled by my dad's yelling and thunderous footsteps because they immediately scurried away, leaving me covered in scratches and bites from head to toe. My dad got me out of the crawl space and took me to a hospital to get bandaged up and also to get a tetanus shot. I was still shaken by what I experienced, but also relieved to be alive. My dad apologized to me 1,000 times while I was recovering in the hospital bed, saying he should have taken me seriously, and I forgave him. He called an exterminator the next morning to gas the whole house. My dad and I had to spend a week in a hotel before returning home. And when we did, we never heard any more scratching inside the walls. Years have passed since then, but I'll never forget that awful sensation of being swarmed by rats trying to eat me alive.
Basements have served a purpose for centuries. Whether someone has used them for storage or hold prisoners, they've had practical use. Considering the fact that some have been used to hold prisoners, some contain hidden places where people have endured torture. It's a tale as old as time, and it's what makes people afraid of basements. Something about being underground in a dark, dark place is unsettling, no matter what is down there. I'm Ned, and my son Fallon is turning 14 years old, and insisted he wanted his bedroom to be in the basement. I'm becoming a man, Dad. I need my own space. My wife Alicia placed a full plate of pancakes, eggs, and bacon in front of him.
We should let him, Ned. I can even help you set it up. How would you like that, Fallon?
You don't have a say. You're not my mom, and I don't need your help. I had just gotten married to Alicia about 6 months ago. My ex-wife and I divorced about 2 years ago. Fallon has been resentful ever since, as he hasn't seen his mother. Try as my poor Alicia might, Fallon wouldn't accept her as a mother figure in his life. Not that Alicia tried to replace her, but the boy needed someone in that role. Fallon, we've talked about this. You can't talk to Alicia like that. Like what? I'm just stating the facts. That's what the therapist told me to do. The therapist didn't give you a warrant to be an asshole either. Alicia is part of this house now, and you will respect her. Fallon pushed his plate away. I have to go. Eat your breakfast, I yelled after him. I'm not hungry. He grabbed his backpack and stormed out the door. Alicia sat down and placed her hand on top of mine.
I appreciate you standing up for me.
No need to thank me for that, baby.
I know, but I married a good man, and I want him to know that.
She smiled and kissed me. I married a good woman, and I know with time, Fallon will see that too.
Thank you, my love. Listen, Fallon's birthday is in 2 weeks, and if he really wants his room in the basement, I say we surprise him and create a little man cave for him. I'll design it myself, and I know some guys who can whip it up in time for his birthday.
Alicia, you don't have to be that nice to him. Besides, it's not like a gesture like that will win him over.
No, but being hard on him is only going to push him further. I know how hard divorce can be on a kid. I came from a broken home too. Let me do this for him as my gift.
If you insist, I'll let you surprise him. Alicia was an interior designer, and with inspiration from Fallon's room and other interests, she and a crew had made up a section of the basement to be Fallon's own man cave, complete with a full-sized bed, LED lights, a flat-screen television, and gaming system. She also threw in a small refrigerator for all his soda pop and snacks. By the time his birthday came around and he saw his room, his eyes lit up, and to my surprise, he hugged Alicia and thanked her over and over again. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I'm sorry for being mean.
I accept your apology.
Now that Fallon was settled in the basement, he started spending a lot of time down there. It got to the point where he was either in school or down in the basement. He didn't come up for anything. Then he started locking the basement. I didn't think anything of it until I started hearing screaming from the basement at night. I went down to see what was going on, pounding on the basement door. Fallon, I just heard screaming. Are you okay? Fine, Dad. I'm just watching a horror movie. Can you turn it down, please? Fine. I went back upstairs, and it was quiet the rest of the night. As time went on, women began to go missing. A strange smell started wafting from the basement, and Fallon just insisted that he had left some cheese out, and as soon as he finds it, he'll dispose of it. Something about his excuses didn't sit well with me, especially since he started being not only disrespectful toward Alicia, but me too. He grew agitated and unreasonable. One day, while he was at school and Alicia was on a business trip, I went down to the basement, and what I saw drained the color from my face. His man cave looked like any teenage boy's room, but the smell came from down the hall. I followed the trail, and to my horror, there was a room I didn't know about, where at least 6 women were all tied up and gagged. They were in nothing but a bra and underwear, clearly dehydrated. They looked at me with fear in their eyes. I looked around and found a video camera set up on a shelf above Fallon's bed. I took the camera and played the footage. I only made it a few seconds before I stopped and doubled over, puking all over the floor. I ran upstairs to get my phone and called the police. There was a reason we cut contact with my ex-wife, Emily. Why Fallon was in therapy. She used to go into his room at night and mark her territory, if you catch my drift. I went to the juvenile jail they're keeping him in to talk to him, as I haven't really seen him since they arrested him. I sat down at the desk and watched him come sit on the opposite side of the window that separated us. We each picked up the phone. "Hey, Fallon." "Hi, Dad." "What did you do to those women?" A sinister smile crept across his lips, and the look in his eyes was not of my son, but a demon. "I needed her, Dad. I needed Mom. She used to make me feel good. And then you took that away from me. I wanted it back. I had to get that feeling back. You took her away. So this is all your fault." I hung up the phone and stood. To not only hear that my son was being violated, but he also seemed to enjoy it and was violating other women to seek that pleasure. I was so ashamed that I couldn't look at him ever again. Alicia and I moved away and started a new life in a new city. Fallon is dead to me.